Hey everybody, today I'm talking about my top 10 games that I soured on. So these are the games where at one point in my life I really enjoyed them, and for one reason or another my enjoyment of those games has diminished as time has gone on. And that can be for many reasons, so let's talk about those reasons as I go through these games. So at number 10 I have Citadels. Now Citadels is a really popular game that's held up well over the years. I think it's probably 20 plus years old now. It's a game where you are drafting cards, and these cards are all these different roles, and you are basically selecting one of these roles in order to do different things, such as maybe stopping up someone else using their ability, or collecting gold, or collecting cards. And essentially you are then using money to build buildings, trying to score points. And there's lots of different ways you can score points. But the reason why my enjoyment for this died down was because I recall several game sessions where it's outstayed its welcome massively. You know, I was first very much engaged with this game. I thought it was really cool how all the different roles interact with each other. Some really good replayability because there is a lot of variable setup. But as I said, the game goes on probably towards that hour mark, and I think it should be half of that really. It just did have dragged on. You know, that last 20% or so just seemed to just really just dig its claws in and just drag and plod along and just churn along, and I just didn't quite enjoy that, and I could feel the energy of the room just dissipating as the game went on. Additionally, on top of that, I thought in terms of strategic gameplay, a real strong strategy in this game was to just collect money and build what you can when you can, and that really didn't give the game legs in terms of what it could do, because a lot of the buildings did work well together in different ways where you could score a lot of points, but a lot of that was just in vain because it was always a viable strategy just to build quickly and just smash things out, and that would often win, which again left me quite unsatisfied. And after I played this quite a few times and experiencing that again and again, it just left me feeling a bit tainted on it and not wanting to play it anymore. So that is why Citadels is at number 10. At number 9, I have a game that sat really highly in my rankings a few years ago. This one is Gugong. Gugong by Andreas Stedding, who is a designer I think is brilliant. It really did make me flip-flop a bit more than any other game ever has. When I initially played this game, I was just in love with it. I thought it was great, all the different mini games working together. This is like a worker placement game where you were using cards, trying to swap cards for other cards, which gives you your kind of hand for the next round. I liked all the way the different mini games work together because I like games like Trajan where you have that mini game aspect. But the more and more I played this one, I started to understand that the depth wasn't quite there. It was very much a wide game where you could do lots of different things, but I thought the linkage and the synergies and the just the depth of the game didn't quite match up to my initial expectations, and a lot of that was because of that new game feel. You know, I got the nice deluxe Kickstarter version, and I played this just before one of my top 100 lists, I think, or top 50 lists. And for that reason, just because of timing, it sat really highly. But as time went on, I started to think, you know what? I'm just doing the same thing here. The strategies aren't too interesting, you know, just a silly bit of area control, a bit of set collection. And you can say that about a lot of games. But yeah, it just didn't quite have the depth that I wanted it to. And again, a wide game, but not particularly a deep game. And I still think it's solid. I would still put it, you know, a 6, a 6.5. But initially, I think I rated it about a 9 or so. And just with repeated plays, it just didn't have that satisfaction remaining. And that's why Gugong is at number 9. Next up, I have Bang the Dice Game. I seem to be talking about this game quite a lot recently. This one is a social deduction game based with Yahtzee, as you are rolling dice, trying to shoot your opponents and things, but everybody is given a secret role, being the sheriffs, the outlaws, or the renegades, and the objective is for the sheriff and the deputies to survive, and the outlaws to kill the sheriff and the renegade to be the last man standing. And the reason this didn't stay in my my appreciation of the game went down and down and down as time went on was initially I thought it was great. I thought the game was really well balanced. You know, everybody could just pull the wool over each other's eyes, trying to bluff who's on whose team and stuff like that, and that all worked absolutely fine. But after 20 or plus plays, I noticed that the Renegade never ever won. And for me, that was just a sign that role wasn't balanced. I did see him come close to winning, but after that many plays, you'd think, it would at least stand a chance. And on top of that, it started to be that bluffing aspect of people choosing to be on what roles and things, and trying to convince the sheriff you're on their side, became less palpable as a strategy. It would often be just a matter of just saying, you know what, we're the outlaws, let's all just admit we're outlaws and just pound the sheriff. So, and again, that defeats the object of the game. And when objectively I could sit back and think, why wouldn't you do that? I just don't see a reason to go back to it. And that's why Bang, the dice game, fell from grace for me. Next up, at number 7, I have Lords of Waterdeep. This is an immensely popular entry-level worker placement game. And you know what? This isn't actually a slight on the game itself. I think it does what it does very well. I recall my first 5 plays of this or so being extremely excited about it as you're placing your workers on the board, collecting different adventurers and fulfilling these contracts. But as time went on, more and more of these games started coming out, where you just place things down, collect, fulfill a contract, and rinse and repeat. This game does that, and it does that probably better than most games out there. But my personal incentive and my desire to play games like that has diminished rapidly. I like to play more heavier worker placement games, and Lords of Waterdeep is often a game that people want to play and suggest playing, and my desire to do that just isn't there anymore. Initially I rated this at about an 8 or so, and now I put it about a 6, because it is very, very mediocre out there now. Although it does what it does very well, it still just doesn't have that extra edge to stick its kind of head above the pack, really. And that's more of a personal opinion than a lot of these other ones. Next up, I have Unlock. Now, Unlock was, I suppose a couple of years ago now, these escape room type games really did blow up and reached tremendous popularity. And initially, I recall playing the first box of Unlock and just being absolutely just amazed with what this game did. That mix of the puzzles and escape room with the small narrative going through, playing through on the app and using the puzzles on the app. I thought it was amazingly well done, just simple and just well implemented. Then I played some of the other ones, and some of the other puzzles fell so flat for me that it left quite a sour taste in my mouth. I mean, some of the highs and lows of these puzzles are just huge, and I think the level of consistency just isn't there to a point where I think playing a new one is just a massive gamble for me. I think the genre in general is getting a bit tiresome for me anyway, but I would say that games like Exit do what Unlock does better than Unlock. But yeah, it was a matter of losing its trust for me. I particularly recall the cowboy-based scenario, and I just absolutely hated it. It just fell so flat. I don't think anybody enjoyed it. Some of the puzzles just didn't quite make sense. The story just didn't quite add up. It wasn't fun, and I just wanted it to end. And for that reason, it's just left the whole genre, particularly the Unlock series, as being quite tainted in my mind. And my desire to play these Unlock games has just gone, and I won't be buying another one. Maybe if somebody suggested playing one of theirs, I would do so. But I won't be spending my own money on those games. And that's why Unlock is at number 6. At number 5, I have Codenames. Now, Codenames probably one of the most popular modern board games out there. A party-based game. Two teams are competing against each other to try and help their team locate their certain words on this 5x5 grid. Great concept. Worked really well. Again, had a lot of success in my initial board gaming years. But this was a matter of having a number of games that turned south quite quickly. I think the rules themselves leave a lot to interpretation. Well, at least in the minds of the players. I always found that players went around the rules in terms of giving their teammates clues and different little tells in terms of choosing what their word's going to be. And that personally frustrated me, being a bit of a rules lawyer, which I apologise for. But I thought that there was a number of games that came out after Codenames that did what Codenames does a lot better than Codenames does. Games like Decrypto, games like Cross Clues and Crosswords. I find those so much more fun and release a lot of that horrible player tension, and also putting players on the spotlight, or under the spotlight, like Codenames does. A lot of players aren't comfortable just sitting there having to give their clues to their teammates, and the analysis paralysis can go in. The downtime in between turns can drag on a bit too long, particularly if you don't want to use the timers, which a lot of people don't like that pressure anyway. So I thought there's just too many obstacles and too many little things that just stopped it being as enjoyable as it should be, and ultimately new games have replaced it for that reason. I would never want to play this probably again. I would play it again because I know people are so familiar with it, but I would always recommend the other games over it, and I just don't enjoy it nearly as much as I used to for those reasons. Next up, I have Emotep. Emotep, I'm not sure if it was a Spiel des Jahres winner or a nominee a few years ago. This one, mechanically simple game, as you're collecting these different bricks and putting them on ships and sending them off to these different action cards in order to score different points, such as scoring the highest obelisk or building pyramids and things. Really cool concept. Again, mechanically streamlined by a great designer in Phil Walker Harding. Initially, I started quite highly on this one. I thought it was a really nice family-weighted game, easy to explain, and had some interesting decisions. Then, the more I played it, the more I started to get frustrated with how much your actions were taken out of your hands. Whatever you did, because you'd load these boats and with your stone, putting them in any order you want, you basically sacrifice your turn and lay it up for somebody else to sell that ship to a place that you didn't want to go. And I understand that's part of the fun. But it got to a point where no matter what you placed on, you'd never ever end up going where you wanted to go, because it was always in the in the best interest of the other players to sell you away to somewhere else rather than help themselves, and that became a bit tedious for me. It became a bit obvious, and again, that autonomy was taken away from the players, and it became more of a matter of just screwing your opponent up rather than helping yourself. And the more and more that went on, the more I looked on this game with not quite the gaze as I did before. Just wasn't quite enjoyable, and just my appreciation of it just went down rapidly as games went on. And unfortunately, that's why Emotep is this high on the list. Next up, I have widely acclaimed social deduction game Interception: Murder in Hong Kong. This one played a lot of times over the years, really did rack up the player counts in this one. And I think the reason for that one is because for a lot of social deduction games, people don't like being put under the pressure. And this one did a good job of eradicating that and giving you quite obvious scapegoats and alternatives to suggest to the people accusing you. It's a game where you are basically one player is a scientist trying to help the other players decipher who the murderer is by giving clues. Works well in theory, the theme works great. The more and more I played this one, and particularly towards the end of its lifespan, I started to notice that people weren't enjoying it quite to the aspect they were before. It had a bit of a meta game in terms of previous clues leaning towards certain things and giving people who played it before very strong clues based on that. It became more of a process rather than the whole experience. Is that clear? Therefore, I'm going to put it here, here, and here, because of what we've done before. And for that reason, the energy of the game, the theme of the game, and just what the game's supposed to provide was just undercut really and undermined to a point where it wasn't that fun anymore. The creativity of it was just diminished as the game went on, and I think it's one of those games where you want to keep playing it with different people rather than keep playing it with the same people. And the reason why it did fall down was because I had too many of those games that just fell flat. And I think the lifespan of this game just naturally is gonna fall. Maybe that's a personal experience, but I'm not. Well, I haven't played this for quite a while now, and nobody seems to be missing it. Let's put it that way. Next up is Captain Sonar, and this one is probably the perfect example of a game that is super cool, great concept of being a submarine versus submarine battle, where you have teams of 3 or 4 competing with each other with asymmetrical roles. One being the captain, one being the kind of the navigator, and trying to scope out where your opponents are on this grid, trying to use weapons to shoot and use them, and technologies and things. Really cool concept. Basically, a live action battleships. The problem with this game is that the obstacle of getting this to the table became a huge burden, because you'd have to teach basically 4 different games to 2 different teams. And on top of that, the game, when it gets going, especially if you want to play the full experience and being a real-time game, it was so chaotic, people shouting over each other and not respecting, stopping at certain points and things. It became just a massive headache to teach and to govern and to play. And ultimately, if everybody wasn't in the experience in playing it, and everybody wasn't playing in the spirit of the game, it could just very quickly go off the train tracks. And I personally wasn't willing to put in the effort after so many failed attempts. Now, don't get me wrong, I did have a lot of successful games with this one, but at this point, I'm not really willing to take that kind of scarce gameplay time, which is quite valuable to me, in a game that's most likely going to fall flat and people aren't going to enjoy and just get caught up in, and just goes off the rails too often, one too many times for me. And while I would still play this maybe in a game club scenario where everybody wants to play it, I wouldn't really play this one amongst people who I know aren't so keen on that chaos and stuff. And I personally am leaning away from that chaotic style game, and I think there is any stronger example of that than Captain Sonar. And that's unfortunate, because, as I said, the game itself is extremely strong, at least in the concept, but just way too much room for going wrong. And finally, the game that fell the furthest from grace for me is Dead of Winter. Now, Dead of Winter was one of the games I probably played initially in the hobby, one of my first board games I got. A cooperative game with the potential of a traitor, as you are working together trying to overcome not only the harsh weather conditions, but different obstacles thrown at you, trying to fight off the zombies and trying to fulfill personal and public objectives. Great idea. Now, I'm not a massive zombie fan, but I did quite like the idea of survival and working together and things. But the more and more I played games, particularly more mechanically maybe involved games, I started to just sit back and look at this game objectively and think, what am I actually doing in this game? And it became very apparent that all you do is go to a certain location and basically top deck of a stack of cards, trying to get the cards you want. There's this huge veneer of all the zombies going on, and the storylines and interactive cards that trigger when certain people do certain things. I know that's great, but the gameplay itself, again, the more experience I got, became so apparent that you really aren't doing much in this game, and it is pretty lackluster actually when you look at it. As I said, just sneaking off to a location and basically searching for a bunch of cards to get what you want. And that's not really a good game in my opinion. And as more time goes on, time has gone on, I've realised that. And again, initially I voted this 7.5, 8 out of 10. Now I put this probably at about a 4. Drags on way too long. Probably goes on 1.5, maybe even 2 hours plus to play this one. And not for me anymore. I can appreciate why it's so successful. A lot of people still do talk highly of this game because of those thematic tie-ins, and the Crossroads cards are very clever. As people do things, and if they do certain things, you read off a bunch of text, and the characters interact with each other and all these things. But again, the gameplay is the sole focus for me, and this one just didn't hold up at all. Hence why Dead of Winter is the game I've soured on the most. So something a bit different here. Not the most positive of videos, but sometimes I think it's important to get that balanced aspect, not only to talk about the games that I've loved, and I have really enjoyed these games, but now I don't think so highly of them, and I think that's important. So again, I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.